Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Thursday evening Parent Academy webinar session. Thank you for joining, and again, we're excited to have you as audience listeners and participants. I am Tina Folston Hayes, the Parent Academy Specialist for Educational Equity and Outreach for Alachua County Public Schools, and I welcome you this evening. Tonight, we will receive some helpful information from our guest speaker, Ms. Jennifer Rojas from parentguidance.org. And just before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping elements. Please keep your microphones on mute through the duration of the presentation, and we will be monitoring your questions accordingly. Ms. Jennifer is going to introduce you to a program called Menti, and so that will be available for you to communicate with her. The Q&A feature located at the bottom of your webinar window is also available. So if you have any need for any conversations that you would like to have, please utilize that option. Also, all Parent Academy webinars are closed captioned and recorded and posted for access at a later date or re-review for any individuals who could not tune in live tonight. If you need to reach the Parent Academy for any reason, the Parent Academy's email address is parentacademy@gm.sbac.edu. And I will get to those questions forwarded to the correct Alachua County personnel, Ms. Jennifer, or myself. And without further ado, I will go ahead and like to welcome Ms. Jennifer. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here with you tonight, to be hosting tonight's session. So as everybody is arriving, please feel free to get a pen and paper ready for note-taking. So during our time together, you're going to need your computer or your tablet to view the content, and then your phone to use a website called Menti. So this is going to be our tool for collaboration, allowing us to engage in interactive activities throughout our session. So while we're getting everybody started, just know that there are two ways that you can get logged into Menti. One is you can open a browser and go to menti.com, that's menti.com, and enter the code 6506 1296. Or the other way is you can open the camera app on your phone, and that QR code will get you to the same place. So this is really, this is our main form of communication so that we can eliminate all of the background noise. And also it's also anonymous and confidential so that everyone will feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and emotions. So we'll know that any of the contributions that you make on Menti are coming from fellow Alachua County Public School parents, but we don't know who said what. So once you are in Menti, please feel free to give me a like just so that I know that you are ready to get started. Right. So while we take this brief pause, I am going to also put the information in the chat. So let me put that as well. Oh, I don't think I have the ability to share. Would you repost this for me, please, Ms. Folston Hayes? All right. Well, it looks like there are a lot of folks that are logged on already, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right, so welcome to the Mental Health Series hosted by ParentGuidance.org. My name is Jennifer Rojas, and I'm an Impact Manager with the Cook Center for Human Connection. It is my honor to be here to lead you through tonight's session. So I'd really like to express my gratitude to Dr. Edwards for introducing ParentGuidance.org to your school and arranging these discussions aimed at assisting you in supporting your child's well-being. So tonight's session is all about suicide prevention, and this can be really heavy, but it can also be very hopeful. So please know that we are all here to learn not just from our expert, who I'm going to introduce in a couple of moments, but also from each other to support each other. But our discussion will be led tonight by Dr. Greg Hudnall. He is a leading expert in suicide prevention, and our session is centering around what parents need to know about suicide prevention. So the goal for this session is to gain better understanding of the why behind suicide, becoming aware of the warning signs, what not to say, what not to do, and also what you need to say and what you need to do. And then finally, where you can go for help. So I'd like to start off by getting to know you a little bit better. What age range do your children fit into? To share this information, you can open Menti, either on your phone or on your computer, and then select the age of your kids. Maybe it's elementary, middle school, high school, maybe you have some older kids. You can select all the categories that apply to your family. And then once you've made your selections, you can hit that submit button. So as you and others are answering, we are seeing these results in real time. And this is a very good example of the types of interactive activities we'll be experiencing throughout our time together tonight. So we have a little bit of everything. Older and middle school are in the lead, but elementary and high school about the same proportions as well. So thank you so much for sharing. The official journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics shows that suicide is the second leading cause of death for children aged 15 to 19. So what I'd like to do is ask you, what insights are you eager to gain tonight, or what are your most pressing concerns? Please share on your phone in Menti your thoughts. And some common concerns that I hear, what do I do if my child knows someone who died by suicide? What do I say, or how do I even begin this conversation? We often hear that people just, really their main thing is that they do not want to make things worse. What are some of those warning signs that someone might be struggling? Child hiding symptoms of suicidal ideation or pretending. Suicide prevention, where to get help, eating disorders. I have a daughter with anxiety, worrying about, what will happen later on. Okay, thank you so much for sharing. How to respond to those negative thoughts and comments. Yes. And I wish this were not as common as it is, but it is. Having negative thoughts are very common. So we'll definitely talk about that as well. And we'll definitely look as well at, what are some of the warning signs that someone might be struggling? So remember, tonight's session isn't just an opportunity to learn from Dr. Hudnall or myself, but really from one another. Your hopes and concerns may resonate with other parents, making this a valuable space for mutual learning. So this is your chance to reflect on your parent-child relationships and to explore strategies to enhance those connections. So, as we talk about suicide prevention, I do want to be very clear. We want to be hopeful. We want to be positive. This subject can be heavy and it can be hard. Research shows, though, that an increase in family support makes a difference to people who are struggling. And so we can make a difference for our family and for our kids. This does not prevent everything. There are still things that can go on, but we can be a support for our kids, and that is really important. So in the midst of all this, we need to have hope, and family is hope. You'll hear a term throughout our time together called suicidal ideation. So I just want to tell you what ideation is. Suicidal ideation means thinking about how much better off the world would be without you, or how great it would be if you could just run away from all of your problems. And in the extreme, it means trying to think of ways that you could end your life and not be a burden to others. Let's meet our expert for tonight's session, Dr. Hudnall. He is a really wonderful man, but who has experienced some really horrifying things as a principal. He lost a number of children during his years as principal to suicide. So serving in his role as principal, Dr. Hudnall one time had to identify the body of a student, and it really broke him. So he has spent the last 30 years involved in suicide prevention. He was a crisis team leader, a first responder, and then he went back to school to receive his master's in counseling, where he worked for 4 years in an emergency room working with families. So from that, he started the Hope Squad, which is a peer-to-peer school-based suicide prevention program, because kids talk to kids, and he's dedicated his life to suicide awareness and prevention. So let's hear now from Dr. Hudnall addressing why kids don't reach out for help.
One of the challenges is that we know that the brain isn't fully developed, that though that impulse control, planning, organizing, and that prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until young people are 24, 25, 26 years old. We as adults sometimes look at our children and we see them in these large bodies, football players, actors, actresses, whoever it is, our own children. And we think they're so talented, they're so smart, that we tend to compare them to adult bodies. And the reality is a lot of that prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. Now, you and I think it is. And sometimes we treat them that way, and sometimes we expect them to act that way. But it's important to remember that people that are struggling with severe depression, a mental illness, whatever it may be, a lot of times they don't understand what they're going through. It's difficult for them to describe their feelings. And a lot of times they're embarrassed, they're ashamed. They don't want anybody to know. I visited with a young man who had been hospitalized for attempting suicide. They brought me in to work with him. And one of the questions I asked is, why didn't you tell someone? And he said, first of all, I didn't want anybody to know. I thought I was the only one. And a lot of times they own it that way, and so they don't reach out for help. So for the rest of the presentation, I want you to think about and have the thought in your mind that if you see someone struggling, don't ask them if they need help to come to you. You go directly to them. Cross that path. Have the courage to reach out to them.
So let's revisit what we're going to learn tonight. We're going to talk about why suicide occurs, the warning signs, what not to say and do, what you need to say and do, and where to go for help. Let's hear from Dr. Hudnall, his perspective on that terrible question, that why.
Probably the number one reason that young people take their life is they feel all alone, and it's intolerable for that isolation and aloneness. There's many times I get brought in to work with young people, and one of the first questions I'll ask is, give me the names of 2 of your best friends. And I'm amazed at the number of times where that young person will say, well, there's Johnny. And I'll ask, what's Johnny's last name? I don't know. Where does Johnny live? I don't know. That's not a best friend, that's a classmate. And I'm finding more and more young people who have cell phones, that a lot of connections, but they really don't have friends that they can talk to and that they can have that experience. Remember, Maslow talks about that families provide food, clothing, shelter, and safety, and then society provides everything else. By the time you're in middle school, it's more important to have a friend than it is to have a family. Now, Hard for you and I to believe as parents, right? Because we're doing everything we can to provide food, clothing, shelter, and safety, and connection with them, which is really important. But at some point in life, it's critical to have that relationship with that peer. And that relationship helps us learn what's right, what's not right in society. We get to share emotions and feelings and experiences with them that a lot of times we would never even share with our family. So by far, I see isolation and aloneness as one of the top stressors for young people. I was in the emergency room with an amazing young junior high student, beautiful young lady. They brought me in after she had attempted suicide. So the doctors worked with her and everybody, and then I got to meet with her. And one of the questions I always like to start out with is, help me understand what was going on. And she said, Dr. Hudnall, do you know what it's like to go to school with 1,400 other kids, share a locker, go to 5 classes a day, and for 2 full weeks, not one person even mentioned my name? She said, I felt like I didn't exist. Now, there were some challenges at home. Parents were going through a divorce, so there were a lot of other issues with that. So think about the crisis within the home setting. She needed that safety and connection outside of it, but she wasn't able to find it. And she said, I felt like no one even knew that I existed. And so she attempted suicide. Now, in visiting with her, she admitted she didn't want to die. She wanted the pain to go away, but she didn't know how to make that pain go away.
Dr. Hudnall said that during the middle school years, kids need a friend more than family. Have you seen this to be true in your own family? I personally have found this to be true as well. That influence of friends is so strong. So I'd like to ask, what have your experiences been with your child? Have you seen your child shift their priorities from family to friends in their preteen or in their teen years? So on your phone in Menti, please share what your experience has been. Okay, so far 100% of people have seen that shift. So think about this. How many friends, true friends, not classmates, does your child have? Have you asked your child about their friends at school? Do you know if they have virtual friends? Maybe friends who they once went to school with, but they moved away, or but they still keep in contact, maybe play online games together. At this stage of development, friends start to have more influence over our children than we do. And they're willing to defy you to do what their friend wants. So it is nice for our kids to feel some level of control in friendships because they're always told what to do and when to do it by their parents. Yes. So we want them to strive for affirmation and for love so that they can learn and build resiliency, that they can make mistakes and learn from them. So opportunities to stumble in a safe place. So let's talk about this a little bit more with Dr. Hudnall.
And what we've learned is what we call academic performance anxiety. And it's when adolescents who believe that affirmation and love are won and earned are the most vulnerable because there's no capacity to psychologically manage that failure. We as adults have created a whole new generation of young people that have never been allowed to fail. See, you and I as adults remember that embarrassment, that shame that we felt when we were bullied, when we were left out, whatever it is. And so we swoop down. It's the snow plowing parents, it's the helicopter parents, it's whatever the terminology is. we feel that we need to do everything we can to give our child that extra chance. You read about it. My goodness, there are, famous actors and actresses that are paying lots of money to try to get their children in through the back door into universities and other things. But here's the reality of it. Every time we step in and take away that opportunity for our child to learn from that failure, from that inability or whatever it is, that's one more time we take away the ability for them to build resiliency. And I stand in front of hundreds of parents when I do my presentations, and one of the things I plead with the parents, please let your child fail. Now the parents go, oh, wait a minute, you're talking about suicide. You're talking about failure. But I'm talking about the small things, being left off of a team, not being invited for a dance, things that going through life that as you and I look back on, helped us create who we are. And if someone had swooped in and not allowed us to have that experience, then you and I would not be where we're at right now in our lives. Children and kids need opportunities to fail so that they can learn from that and then build that resiliency inside themselves. I teach a graduate course at a college level. It's a master's level class. I've been teaching it, adjunct professor, for over 15 years. I've been amazed at these kids in this class that don't know how to fail. And in their mind, what they see as a failure is something that I see as actually a pretty good grade. They just need to work at it a little bit more. So let your child fail. But the difference is we're asking you to be there to help them pick up the pieces, to learn from that experience, and then to surround them with love and support so that they can move to the next level. Never allowing your child to fail is creating a challenge for them in the future. Because when they get hit hard by something else, they're not going to be able to deal with it. And then that's where we see, because of that impulsivity and other things, they turn to that next serious level of attempting suicide.
So here's a moment of truth. Are you willing to share an instance or two where you've swooped in to save your child? I turned off the screen sharing just for a moment, just to give everyone a little bit of privacy while you think about and perhaps share. And if you're just taking notes for yourself, this is your time. This is for you. But looking back, where might it have been a great learning opportunity? And of course, this is hindsight, but when might it have been a great learning opportunity for them to stand or fall on their own? No judgment here. We have to have honest conversations for reflection to evaluate our own parenting. So in parenting, it is super important to evaluate, what worked and what didn't. And everything that works with one child is probably not going to work with another child. So are you a rescuer? A classroom project, how many of us, again, no judgment, kid goes to bed at 10 o'clock and there we are until 2 o'clock in the morning finishing it. Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, mom, or texting, I left my gym clothes. Can you come drop them off at school? How many times have we swooped in and not let them experience those consequences of, yep, well, you didn't bring the equipment you needed to bring to school today. You're going to have to face those consequences. The favorite question that when it comes to this is asking your child, so, what are you going to do about that? As soon as you make it your problem, it's your problem. It's not their problem anymore. And so you're taking away the need for your child to activate their problem-solving skills. When we provide opportunities for our kids to solve their own problems, we are actually treating them as adults. And as kids get older, the costs of the mistakes get higher. Little kids, little problems. Bigger kids, bigger problems. So as those stakes start getting greater, that's when parents really start fearing that they have to swoop in because the stakes are so high. You have to start when they're little. By the time that they're in high school, uh, they really can't, where if they don't turn in the project, you have that incomplete project, your GPA is, now on the line. So let's go back and see what people have said, what people have shared. Oh, where'd my window go? Here. Let's see what people have shared. Oh, okay. Not one or two, 7 billion examples of swooping in. Yes. Sending my kid to a small charter school rather than a larger public school. Those are very good examples. Thank you so much. So let's go back to Dr. Hudnall as he explains, why does suicide occur?
One of the questions that I get asked a lot, even by professionals, is why does the suicide happen? My son was so popular. My daughter was so beautiful. They had everything that you could imagine as a family. But what we've learned through the years is that suicide most often occurs when those stressors exceed that current coping ability. So what happens to one young person is enough to be an irksome and they get angry and walk away, but it may be enough for someone else to push themselves over the ledge. And that's the challenge. Suicide is so individualized and it's so unique to that individual. The interesting part, and I talk with my wife a lot, who's a therapist who works with the adult veterans. She talks about the concept that many adults will spend months, a year planning their suicide. They're going to do it in a certain spot. They're going to go out and raise money to buy a certain kind of weapon, whatever it is. Young people, I call it the 24 to 48 hour window. Something happens in their life, romantic breakup, disciplinary action, something that pushes them towards the edge. And not only because, remember, that impulsivity isn't fully developed in their brain. And so because of that, there's an immediate response. And that immediate response is to that pain that's happening. And so they respond to that. Our crisis team responded to a suicide in the southern part of our state. Beautiful young lady, senior in high school, full ride scholarship to play volleyball. From the outside looking in, everybody would have thought, what a perfect, charming life. The reality, she struggled. Her boyfriend broke up with her. She contacted a couple of friends, chatted with them that night, said, I'm at the end of my rope. I don't think I can take this crap anymore. And then those young friends didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to ask, so it wasn't their fault. The very next morning, she came to school, put all of her journals in the boyfriend's locker, and then went upstairs to the girls' bathroom and took her life. It happened that fast. As we investigated and started peeling back the layers, what we found, what we perceive, is that in that young lady's mind is, if I take my life, see, remember, there's no rational thinking when a young person is in a crisis. All they can do is get that feeling of, I want that pain to go away. I can't take the pain anymore. So there was no rational thinking from that perspective. So one of the things that we've learned through the past 30 years that I've been doing this is that suicide never occurs outside of the context of a major social stressor. So when you see your children responding to a stressor or their inability to respond to that stressor, that's when it's important. That's when it's important to get involved.
So as we're learning from Dr. Hudnall, the causes of suicide can be really individual. So we need to watch for warning signs in our children. So let's take a look at some of those warning signs. Okay, so now these are situational. Is the child in a divorce situation? Has the child had a previous attempt? Is the child experiencing a situation where they've been publicly shamed or loss of prestige? Maybe they were an athlete who had an injury and now their whole identity as an athlete has changed. serious illness, a chronic diagnosis, those are things that are also situational warning signs. Another one would be, does the child have a close friend who died by suicide? And these are all situations that kids find themselves in today. Now let's take a look at some of the behavioral signs. Has the child started talking about not wanting to be here anymore? I'm not saying like they're not writing in, a paper that they're writing about warning signs, but that you notice in journal entries or something like that, writing about not wanting to be here anymore. Has the child started to give away prized possessions, things that they shouldn't want to give to others? One of my colleagues talks about, her son, is 10 and he loves Pokemon. And in their community, there was a young boy about the same age who gave away all of his Pokemon cards. And for my colleague, she's like, if my son were giving away his Pokemon cards, I would be saying, oh my goodness, he is so thoughtful, he is so wonderful to his friends, but they are so precious to him that he really, it wasn't really clicking that he shouldn't be giving away those really, really personal things. Failing grades, has your child lost interest or not putting forth in putting forth an effort? Is there a shift in behavior that they're no longer even interested in their grades? And then pulling away. The important thing here is realizing that pulling away is an indicator of depression, and further pulling away is a risk factor for suicide. So let's take a look as well at some of the emotional warning signs. Does the child feel like a failure? Does the child have overwhelming emotions? Are they pulling away from everything, that they don't want to be with friends or family or anyone? So those are some of those emotional warning signs. But there can also be other reasons. We've reviewed some of the more prominent warning signs, but not all of the signs are general. But if your child is self-medicating, meaning is your child dabbling in drugs or in alcohol? Have they had a previous attempt and they did not get help? Any child who attempts suicide, even a half-hearted attempt, means that that child needs professional help. Has the child experienced the loss of a loved one, a parent, a grandparent, a girlfriend, or a boyfriend? So now that we've talked a little bit more and fleshed out the whys, let's move on and talk about what not to say when you do recognize some warning signs. So here's one thing to definitely not say. You don't mean that. You don't really want to die. We may think that, but we should not say this to someone who is suffering. One of the things that Dr. Hudnall shares is that the reality is when we hear, especially our child, when we hear them say they don't want to be here anymore, it scares us, immediately. We go on the defensive. We feel like we have to squash that thought, really quickly. And it's our fear that's making us respond that way. When in reality, the child's feelings need to be validated. You must acknowledge what they are saying and acknowledge what they're feeling. So let's practice this one together. Say something that you could say, a response that would be appropriate to acknowledge how your child is feeling. So let's think this through together. So if your child said to you, I want to die, how would you acknowledge their feeling? when your child is feeling overwhelmed and ready to give up. Maybe your child tells you that everybody hates them, that the world would be better off without them. What do you say? You can say, yes, I see that you're sad. That's acknowledging what they're saying. What would you do if your child says, life is tough? Seems like it'd be, better to check out than deal with all this. I'm hearing you say that you want to die. Can you tell me more about that and how you're feeling? So you're doing two things with that response. You're validating not the desire to die, but you're validating that you hear them. And you're also offering a support. You're saying, tell me more about how you're feeling. It's a very good response. Thank you. You could say, I believe you. You can say, we're going to find help together. You can say, tell me more. So when we ask that question, why are you feeling this way? This is one way that we as parents can help them unpack that hurt and learn from this very hard lesson that they're going through. We all know it's hard to be the last one picked. We know that this hurts. Parents can validate their child's hurt, their child's experiences when they can relate. So you can share a story of maybe when you were picked last and that's how it made you feel. All right. So thank you for sharing. So let's go on to the next one. Here's another one that we don't want to say. We don't want to say suicide is so selfish. Dr. Hudnall is going to go more into detail into why we don't want to say this.
One of the top feelings, emotions, comments that I hear from people is suicide is so selfish, and I cannot believe anybody would think about it. You and I look at it from a different set of lenses than the individual who's going through it. There are a lot of young people and adults, but a lot of young people who feel like they're a burden to their family. I was in the emergency room working with a family, and when I got to visit with the young man, he shared with me he had been hospitalized 3 times. His medication was about $20 a pill. His parents had insurance, but it was 60-40. So the company the father worked for covered 60% of it, but the parents had to pay 40%. That's almost half. First time he was hospitalized, the psychiatrist wanted to work with him twice a week for 3 months at about $150 an hour. That family was shelling out money after money. And so after this last time that he had tried to take his life, he was upstairs sleeping and he could hear his parents talking downstairs. So he walked downstairs and he was at the bottom of the stairs and he could listen to his parents just sobbing, worried that they were going to lose their house because they had used up all their insurance. They had used up all their retirement and savings to help pay for this. That young person at that moment felt like they were the burden. And if they were to take their life, the pressure would be taken away from their family and everything would be okay. I've worked with other families where the young person is the one that's causing the chaos, getting upset, angry all the time, almost like a bipolar back and forth. They know they're the ones that are creating the challenge. And their belief is, you know what? If I go away, the family is going to be so much better without me. That's not a selfish attitude. That is an amazing attitude, but it's in the wrong place. But they're feeling that because of the love and compassion they have for the family members. So don't say that. Don't say suicide is so selfish. We want to be careful with that term.
So here's another thing not to say. Things could be worse. Sometimes in response to a cry for help, people will say something along the lines of, things could be worse. It's really not that bad. And the reality is, yes, it could be worse. But this is a dismissive statement. Remember, a young person's emotions need validation, not dismissal. As Dr. Hudnall reminds us, young people need hope and encouragement to get back to a healthy place of emotions and feelings. And yes, kids do need hope. They don't always need to be punished to learn a lesson. Oftentimes self-punishment is happening regardless. So we need to offer hope to help them to correct or change their outlook, to impact their future. So here's one more thing not to say, just get over it. Again, we need to acknowledge their feelings. You don't know what people's experiences have been or what they're going through right now. It is such an individual thing. Earlier, Dr. Huddle said, the same incident for one person they can just brush it off. And for someone else, that same incident could be very, very impactful. And we have no way of knowing if a stressor is exceeding the young person's capacity to deal with it. Let's learn more about this topic.
And then the last term that I hear a lot is that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem and just get over it. I hear that a lot. While it may be temporary to that young person where it's a romantic breakup, disciplinary action, something happened, it's not a temporary problem to an individual who will be struggling with a mental illness their entire life. I do a lot of youth presentations, and I always have kids coming up after my presentation as I'm putting my equipment away. And not too long ago, I did a presentation to about 300 or 400 young people. And afterwards, I had all the kids and, I was signing my book and doing other things with them. But out of the corner of my eye, I could see this beautiful young lady, dark hair, just waiting until everybody was done. So I finished, packed everything up, and I'm headed out the doors to go to my car. And this beautiful young lady comes up to me and she says, "Dr. Hudnall, do you have a second?" I said, "Sure." Tells me her name, and I asked what school she goes to. And then she kind of puts her hand up and she said, "I've just been diagnosed being schizophrenic." And I went, "Wow, that's got to be tough. Let's talk about some of the things that you can do." And I started talking about some of the things that she could do, the new medications, the new counseling they have out that is just amazing to help young people her age. And then she kind of put up her hand. She goes, "No." She goes, "I don't think you get it." I said, "Okay, help me understand what I don't get." She said, "My mother is schizophrenic. For the last 20 years, she's never gotten out of bed. I know what it does to a family, and I don't think I want to be around." That really hit me to my core. That young lady not only felt it, but she had seen it. And so be careful when we hear those comments about, "Oh, it's a temporary response." It's not. Because this young lady knew that for the rest of her life, she's going to have to deal with some challenges that are doable, but there's still going to be challenges that many of us would never even think or never even have to deal with.
So now let's be proactive. Here's what Dr. Hudnall says that what you need to say and what you need to do. Number one, stay calm. Don't try to fix it. Remember what we said earlier about swooping in to rescue? Number two, don't interrupt. Listen. Say 2 words for every 100 words your child says. Act like a friend would. A friend would not try to would not try to fix it. They would listen. So things that you can say are things like, "Tell me more. I am here for you. I am listening." Number 3 is validate and encourage. Don't let this be an "I told you so" moment. I am sure this is really painful for you. As parents, we need to put ourselves in their shoes. Let's say I can imagine how it feels at, 16, 17 to not get asked to go to prom or to the 8th grade dance. And number 4, don't be afraid to ask questions. We're not going to give them ideas of suicide if we talk with them about it. Research shows that you will not put the thought of suicide in their heads. By talking about it, we de-escalate that suicidal ideation.
The second part of that is don't be afraid to ask the tough question. We are afraid to talk about suicide. We're afraid that if we ask the question, it may give someone the idea. But the research continues to show us that a healthy person it bounces off of, and that a high percentage of people struggling have already thought about it because of social media, because of movies, because of books. It's out there. It's out there every single day. When I walk into a classroom, even a middle school class, I'll ask young people in that classroom, 35 kids, how many of you know someone who may be struggling that's even thought about suicide? And it doesn't matter what part of the country I'm in, 80 to 90% of the kids will raise their hands. So they know it and it's around there. So don't be afraid to ask the tough questions. Have you thought about hurting yourself? I like to use that question with younger kids. And then depending on the response, I'll go to the next question. Have you thought about suicide? And then my final question, have you thought about killing yourself? Because I want to know as much as I can, and then I'm going to listen. I've been amazed at the number of times, hundreds and hundreds of times, when young people have been referred to me, and I didn't even know them very well. And sometimes it's the first time I ever met them. And within 10 to 15 minutes, I'll ask that tough question. Danny, thanks for spending some time with me. You were referred by Mrs. So-and-so, and she had read something that you had written in one of your journals in her English class. And she was concerned that you were thinking about hurting yourself. Have you thought about suicide? I've been amazed at the number of times where the kids will, about 60% of the time, will open up and start talking about it. 20% will depend on the relationship, that other 20%. And then the other 20% depend, I don't want anybody to know they're too embarrassed about it or whatever. But don't be afraid, please, to ask the tough questions, because you're never going to find out if you don't ask. And you never know, that may be the last opportunity you have to really find out if your child is struggling. And what the research continues to show, opening that up gives them a chance to share their emotions and their feelings and to feel like it's safe to share. And I'm not going to be embarrassed. I'm not going to be put down for those feelings.
All right, so now let's look at some helpful resources. So first, we're going to share some crisis resources. So 988 is a new way to talk to the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It is a direct connection to compassionate and accessible care at no cost to anyone. And it's there for support for anyone experiencing mental health related distress. It could be anything from distress and thoughts of suicide to, many other issues. Mental health or substance abuse crisis, any other kind of emotional distress. Now, know that the original Lifeline number does continue to work, but now there are more options to find direct connection to compassionate, accessible care and support through calls, through texts, and through chats. And these are all going to be included in the email to each one of you, what that's going to follow up tonight's presentation. Okay, and then we're also going to share some prevention resources. This will be in that follow-up email as well. Some really great apps that have been very helpful to people around the country. Okay. At the Cook Center for Human Connection, we're driven by the mission of bringing together the resources that have demonstrated effectiveness in creating the human connections that are vital for strong mental wellness. And one of these resources is parentguidance.org. It is a free resource backed by therapists who share different courses for parents on mental health topics. So we'll put a link in the Zoom chat so that you're able to explore further, but I'd also like to give you a little bit of a guided tour right now as well. So I'm going to go to parentguidance.org. Make this big. All right. So first thing I want to share is these courses. There are no logins required. You can take as many courses as you want at a time. So you have, so Dr. Hudnall's course, the full course is here at the top. So if you have any parts that you want to revisit, just know that that is there. You can also look for e-courses depending on the topic that you're worried about. So, anxiety and depression, you could come here and then this will narrow it down to all of the courses on anxiety and depression, child development, bullying, parent support. There's some wonderful, wonderful meditations in here and some self-help courses for you as a parent. The other thing I really want to bring your attention to is parent coaching. So this is something that is available exclusively to parents of Alachua County Public School students. That can help you by providing an additional layer of support for you as the parent. So know that you just highlight, go to Florida, and then you come to the drop-down menu, find your school district, and then when you click this Register Now button, you go straight to a calendar where you can pick a time and date that works for you to talk to a coordinator who would then match you up with a coach. Coaching is available at no cost to you, thanks to our partnership between parentguidance.org and Alachua County Public Schools. It is available in English and in Spanish. So just know that this is here for you. Getting matched by with that coach, it's just like 2 or 3 questions. And then once you fill out your questionnaire, you'll be matched with your coach within 48 hours. And you can meet with your coach weekly, again, at no cost to you. It is completely free to parents. And it's not just parents, it's foster parents, grandparents, anyone who is the trusted adult in the life of an Alachua County Public School student is eligible for coaching. So just know that that is there for you as well. All right, with our last few minutes, I do want to invite you to go back to Menti and share with us what are a few things that stood out for you. We talked about the why. Kids feel all alone and they can't tolerate that loneliness any longer. We talked about warning signs, those situational warning signs like divorce, serious illness, being the survivor of a previous attempt, loss of prestige. We talked about behavioral signs, writing or talking about suicide, giving away prized possessions, emotional signs like feeling like a failure, having those overwhelming emotions, pulling away from everything. And then we talked about other signs like self-medicating with drugs or alcohol, or having had a previous attempt without getting help. I know that this has been a really heavy topic. It's a heavy topic for me, but it's not as heavy of a topic as when you actually, lose someone. Allowing your child to fail and learn resilience. Yes. Not swooping in. Let's make sure that, we're doing everything that we can to prevent our children from falling into depression, despair, and suicidal ideation, getting them the help that they need, and getting you the help that you need in supporting your child. All right. Thank you so much for sharing. So our next session will be on November 30th, after Thanksgiving. We're going to be talking about helping your child succeed, and 3 parenting styles that have been, again, research-based parenting styles that can really help parents as well. So you should have a link on your phone now to register ahead. Ms. Folston Hayes, would you like to say something as well? Oh, you're on mute.
Jennifer Tation.
Okay, I hear you now.
Okay, thank you so much for your informative presentation. That was awesome. Hopefully our families will definitely reach out because you guys are available. Those courses are available, those coaches are available. So thank you so much for providing such awesome partnership with our family. So thank you again. And I'll go ahead and close us out for this evening. And I just would like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We appreciate your participation. Each week, you're available to connect with us. Once again, I am Tina Folston Hayes, the Parent Academy Specialist for Educational Equity and Outreach for Alachua County Public Schools. Next week, I look forward to seeing you all here, which is November 2nd. That's actually my birthday. So I would love for you all to join me. Next Thursday, we're going to have a presentation from a representative from FAMU University. So we would love for you guys to join us, and I will go ahead and let everyone go for this evening. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys back on the 30th.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
You're welcome. You too. Good night.
Night.